got a show for you today. We have at least three mind-blowing things that are going to come out in this fabulous, weeping, woken, grokking, Gnostic episode of the Grim Grizz episode making system. Remember, everybody, there is no agency. We want what's best for you. Paul is so disappointed with my commentary on his commentary, or my lack of commentary on his Keith Woods Wokism commentary, he's decided to release a commentary of his own on himself. Here.
Hi, this is Paul. By now I've released the critique of Keith Woods' Wokism and Transhuman Future video, which I thought was a very interesting video. I thought there were a lot of interesting...
You have, and we're going to cover it today on Weeping Woke and Grokking Gnostic, our coverage of Paul's What. Now, I have to explode your mind, and I will do so by telling you that the great and fabulous Chris Petkow has moved on from having wonderful conversations like the one with me.
It begs a question, doesn't it?
To putting beats to sermons. But this one, I don't know, it's kind of neat.
And I want to say something else before I tell you what Paul's scoring was, because you're not going to believe it when you see it. I want to make sure that you understand. But all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All. Paul, y'all, all. Paul, y'all, all.
That's the first mind blow. Your mind should be blown already, and now open and pliable for the input I have on Paul's Wokism is transcending the constraints of the physical world commentary on Keith Woods' video. Whatever the heck he called it, links probably in the description. There is such a big fiasco going on with this thing there that, like, not only has Griswold Grimm commented, but also the great Vervaeke himself, John Vervaeke. He says, "This is one of your best, Paul. I see a lot of overlap with my work, which you acknowledge like a good boy. I would love to talk with you about all of this. I have just completed 2 dialogical series on the self and its capacity for transformation." Your thumbnails are horrible. So these topics are upmost in my mind right now. And so that's hot. And, you know, he is my troll crush, but it's a, what do you call it? You can tell I like him, because look, this one. Okay.
It is so hostile. Once that lab leak occurs, it is so hostile to the way human beings have always lived and desire to live and want to live that there have been this whole various waves of reaction against it.
Okay, this lab leak hypothesis is the same. It's part of the information war. It's the colonization of consciousness congresses. It's the way I impacted your mind that you talk about me on your stream. It's this viral spread, and your lab leak hypothesis is that this Descartes guy gave us all some kind of science virus that resulted in scientism.
Worth noting. But that night, Descartes in the barracks had a dream, and an angel appeared to him, and the angel said, "The conquest of nature is to be achieved through number and measurement."
You know, they eventually get integrated into the system. So, you know, for example, Pentecostalism in Christianity is just a complete denial of modernity. And
What? In case anybody else wants to clip it from here.
And Pentecostalism in Christianity is just a complete denial of modernity. And you have this constant war between the manifest image.
Okay. Now,
and learning to curb our tongues. Oh, be careful, little mouth, what you say, for the wokies all around are ready to cancel you. It's only certain choices that are sacrosanct. There very much is a new law here. You can annoy 95% of cisgender people for the sake of 5%. Now, because the self has no space in our world, we're just going to create a new space for it. And it's because there's no space, it's secret, it's private, it's not public. It is sacred because it's the frame through which you have to interpret the world. That's the secret, sacred self.
Well, good for her, because we're about to hear that that's not quite what's going on.
Yeah, because I think she's trying to, enough people went after her to say that what you did was bad, so she's trying to, like, gaslight herself, I guess, for lack of a better term. They use gaslight a lot. That gets thrown around all the time.
Iron law of woke projection.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear her out for a second here.
Okay.
In order for us to be engaged in conversation with the hopes of moving the needle forward and expanding all of our thinking, we have to ensure that we're coming from the same socio-political lens. So, yes or no, do you believe that we live in a country rooted in white supremacy?
And so somehow in our physical manifestation, we are divorced from the secret, sacred self, and it is our mandate, it is our duty, and the job of society is to facilitate the theosis of the individual into the secret, sacred self, and to achieve that.
Everyone's attacked online. What are you talking about? The world is tough. The world is competitive. Okay, identity is honed. Okay, by conflict. The idea that there should be no conflict, that we have to be in this bath. Okay, of approbation.
Yes.
And which is
well,
just,
that's the devouring
infantile.
mother. That's right. It's absolutely infantile.
Very focused on this idea of self-discovery, and this really comes to fruition with the existentialist movement of the mid-20th century and its maxim that existence precedes essence. The means of salvation in a meaningless, absurd universe that we're thrown into against our consent is this project of the absolute affirmation of the self.
And not enough attention has been paid to why sexual liberation is so central to this agenda. And some might say,
we'd have a good old time, and I would blow your back out, but I wouldn't marry you.
What we have now is an open market. And when people themselves are in an open market, bad things happen. So,
such a cruel dogma for this religion, because there's way too much information out there, and so you have to cut it and watching each other. So to have generalization be a sin is one of the most cruel dogmas you can imagine.
It's just absolutely evil to impose that on someone.
He's just trying to get through his day. Please. It's the full realization and expression of not just will, but desire.
If you claim that someone is limited by something biological about themselves,
and I think his points here about physical constraints, I think are dead on right and key to understanding this whole thing.
And the right and the left both justify themselves now with an appeal to the liberation of the self. In the case of the left, they believe that the self will be liberated by an end to identification with national groups, with religious traditions, with gender. And the left believes that the best way to achieve this is through collective action, through the state. The establishment right disagrees, but it's really only a pragmatic disagreement. The right believes that this transhuman future will be achieved through the function of the market. And they certainly have history on their side when they point to the market as the force that has liberated people from traditional gender roles, that has destroyed traditions.
The extended families, your aunts and grandparents and cousins, all of whom helped form your identity. Okay, so one's identity was as a member of a community, right, rather than in this like hothouse environment.
Now, let's go to a space mystery. They have discovered a mysterious polarized radio signature from near the galactic center, and they have absolutely no idea what it could be.
The best example is Martine Rothblatt. Martine Rothblatt is a trans woman who has donated hundreds of millions to advocacy for the transgender movement, and she wrote a book called From Transgender to Transhuman. Martine Rothblatt says explicitly that transgenderism is really to be understood as a first step. It's the bringing in of this revolution of the freedom of form, as she says. And she spells out clearly that this new picture of the world is about liberating the self from the physical world, and technology will be the means by which that is achieved.
So if you rewind all the way back to
that our development have always been created at the promptings of invisible voices.
Jordan Peterson continues to say that Jung's observation was that the turn to alchemy and physical science was because, in a sense, the spiritual path of the church was not achieving, let's say, and I'm riffing here, achieving everything that we dreamed it would. And so the idea was to look for another path.
That this played itself out in their own narrative. And so I've heard one of the, I forget which wachowski, I forget their name, which one is which, but I heard one of them recently speaking about the relationship between their transitioning and the Matrix, and talking about this idea of freedom and the idea of creativity, that you create yourself, and that they have embarked on a, let's say, path where they are creating themselves, and they're not, you could say something like they're not bound to the authority of the world telling them who they are. And so I think that it makes total sense in their vision of the Matrix and their own story that they would end up where they are. I think that their story isn't over. They're probably will transition into something else at some point.
Eventually, just as prejudices towards sex disappeared as women entered the workplace, that technology will make it so that none of these physical differences matter anymore. We'll all be augmented. It will be possible to separate our consciousness from the body. And transgenderism is really just a first step on the road to that recognition. Together, law and science, heat and light, are the tools we must use to liberate society's potential for unlimited expression of sexual identity. The outcome of this gender awakening will be a new species, a new transhumanity, one that has as its fundamental purpose the assurance of a healthy and fulfilling life for all who value that right.
You'll notice I've put the stick figures in now for the constellation so you can see this a little better. Corresponded, what a coincidence, to Rosh Hashanah, Tishri 1, New Year's Day for Jews, and the Day of Trumpets. Tishri 1 was also the New Year's Day of the civil calendar, according to the calendar accepted in Judah during the divided monarchy. In other words, it marked the first day of the reign of every new Davidic king. What a coincidence.
They designed those controls after watching you. Pick her out.
Right. Okay. Right.
Wake and rise up from thy sleep. Give ear to the words of our letter. Remember that thou art a king's son. See whom thou hast served in thy slavedom. Be mindful of the pearl, for whose sake thou didst journey into Egypt. Remember thy robe of glory,